So a quick Google of anti-Semitism this morning immediately retrieved multiple headlines from today's news. Headlines like blatant act of anti-Semitism at Ottawa High School, anti-Semitic graffiti at Toronto Church, and the anti-Semitic crisis in the United States. So that's but three of a multitude of stories currently in the news. What is going on? Because it kind of seems hard to imagine that things could actually get worse when it comes to anti-Semitism of late, and yet it has worse and worse. Anti-Semitism is on the rise. MIREILLE SILCOFF is a Montreal writer. She recently wrote a piece for the New York Times called Laughing at Kanye Doesn't Help, and she joins us now. Hi, MIREILLE.
Hi.
Thanks so much for your time. So I'm going to ask you that very broad question. What is going on? Why do you think this is happening?
I mean, the very broad answer is I think it's happening because we've come out of the pandemic and we still have COVID and things are hard and, there's a lot of disparity in terms of income, especially in the U.S., and times are pretty tough. And traditionally in Europe and in North America, when times are tough, a social scapegoat might be sought. And, there's a long history of Jews bearing that burden. And I think there's a little bit of that going on. Anti-Semitism works very well as a wedge between the haves and the have-nots. And I think we're seeing that happening now. So the people who are feeling very hard done by right now in society are looking for someone to blame. And, out comes, well, I guess the problem is the Jews because of the association with money and all these other tropes. Old anti-Semitic tropes that go back hundreds and hundreds of years. And, the fat cats who have a lot might be looking for someone to blame for some of their actions as well. So it's convenient to have, something that functions in the way that anti-Semitism does in Western society for people who are looking for a scapegoat.
So,
and I'm afraid that is what we are seeing right now in all different ways. So I hope I don't sound like I'm trying to excuse it in any way by explaining it. But if you want the very big picture of why, I think that is part of the description of why it's happening right now.
So you mentioned the pandemic. You mentioned going through difficult times right now. We're living through a difficult period right now.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking historically, did we look at, I just looked at a figure that said there were more anti-Semitic incidents in 2021 than there ever have been. We know 2022 is on pace to even break that record. Did we go through a lull in these and only recently start to notice these, or have they always been there? We've just not paid attention?
I think you're onto something with both of the things you said. I don't think that more Jews are noticing anti-Semitism, but I do think that as with all hate crimes and as with all methods of reporting, there's a lot more out there now than there used to be. So, I do think that the numbers are indicative of a rise. I don't know if I trust some of the most inflammatory numbers like the one that you just mentioned, Aaron, which says that, there's 100 times more anti-Semitism than there's ever been or whatever. There are a lot more people reporting. There's also a lot more ways to report. The internet and, many different organizations have made it a lot easier to report, for instance, if you see a swastika carved into your child's desk at school, for instance. And people might be more into reporting now than maybe they would have been in times past. So I'm not saying that the numbers are lying, but I am saying that it's important to put those numbers in context so that people don't freak out more than they need to.
So let me just shift to what Natasha introduced as the article called Laughing at Kanye Doesn't Help, which we, I guess, know by now what Kanye has said and the fact that he spouts these anti-Semitic views on a regular basis in public with no shame. So what does that mean? Laughing at Kanye doesn't help exactly, MIREILLE?
Well, what I wrote about in the New York Times article, and it was in the New York Times Magazine a couple of weeks ago, if anybody wants to look it up, is that within the Jewish community, it can be hard to know how to respond to this new anti-Semitism. There are issues on the left and there are issues on the right, and they're very, very different issues. I don't know if we have time to go into those today on this program. But there is a little bit of a conundrum in how do the Jewish people respond to this new wave of hate. And while I don't have the magic answer by any means, I do know that the Jewish community probably needs to come together to try to figure something out. You know, there's the kind of catch-22 of calling out anti-Semitism when it comes to, for instance, somebody really famous like Kanye, who, love him or lump him, does have a lot of cultural credibility still, and he does have a lot of cultural pull. Kanye has twice as many followers on social media as there are Jews in the world. So, you know, you can't just ignore somebody like that. Yeah,
I'm going to stop you for a sec because, you know, as you say that, the argument, of course, is either we ignore it, and if we ignore it, we're not paying any creed to what he's actually saying.
Yeah.
But you're suggesting that's not the right way to deal with this. Am I right?
I don't think ignoring it is the thing to do, but what I was going to say is that calling it out is a bit of a sticky wicket. So if you call it out, then you can have somebody like Kanye saying, you see, I got consequences. You know, Jews do control everything, or whatever trope he might be mired in that day. So it's a bit hard to know how to respond. At the same time, I do not think that the Jewish community should be sitting around eating its heart out right now, or sitting like a sitting duck and just taking it. I think that we need to come together to craft a either new kind of response, old kind of response. Again, I don't have the answer, but the answer must be out there in how to respond to this.
It's the normalizing of it that I find so particularly troubling. The mainstreaming, that's not a word, but you know what I mean? The fact that this has just become, it's like a normal thing for celebrities or Trump and people to behave like this and say these kinds of things.
Yes, I mean, it's one thing to have Kanye West, who has a long history, as we all know by now, of mental illness and all kinds of other issues, and he's got an axe to grind about his divorce. He's got a lot of stuff going on, that guy. So I'm not excusing anything he's said, but you know, people can
he's
take
mentally
Kanye
ill,
with a grain of salt. But when the former president Donald Trump has, you know, a week after Kanye has just been like, I love Hitler, and Nick Fuentes, who's a notable white supremacist, for luncheon, that, to me, is a little bit more scary than one person with a history of mental illness saying the problem is the Jews.
Yeah, and you're right. And that's, Natasha, to your point, that is normalizing it in a sense from someone else who has such a giant, you know, mouthpiece as Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Mireille, we're out of time. I really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much.
And if for those of you who do want to read the article, by the way, you might want to give it another pitch. So it's in the New York Times Magazine as of when?
It was
2 weeks ago?
The week before last,
Okay.
in the Sunday magazine, and it's called Laughing at Kanye Does Not Help.
Does not help. Mireille SILCOFF. Mireille, thanks so much.